Yeah, thank you everyone for showing up. So this is a panel and a Q&A about unions and workers' rights, a very grown-up topic. So thank you so much for showing up. I'm going to represent Game Workers Guild, and I will talk a little bit about what our organization is. And just as Horatio said, my name is Kristian, and I have been working 15 years in the Danish game industry. Right now I'm working at SYBO. And the main reason why I wanted to join Game Workers Guild is because I have worked in, I think, 8 companies at this point. And unfortunately, I have seen some shit in working in the game industry. And I want to make sure that everyone who works in the Danish game industry can feel safe and can feel welcome. And that's why I wanted to join Game Workers Guild. But I'm not running this organization alone. I'm doing it together with these lovely people. And as you can probably see, there are some already familiar faces. Both Jaime and Mads are volunteers here at Nordic Game Jam. I also see Fergus running around, and Alan is sitting out at our booth. So if you have any questions after this panel, you're more than welcome to come poke us. Maybe Jaime and Mads is a bit busy with the Nordic Game Jam stuff, but the rest of us you can totally approach and ask questions. So this is Game Workers Guild, but I haven't really talked about like why we started Game Workers Guild. So I want to do that. But in terms of doing that, I want to talk a little bit about the landscape of the Danish game industry, because if you have been following along the last 2 years-ish, a lot of new organizations has popped up. And I also see people from the other organizations, so I hope I get this right. But we of course have Game Workers Guild, which is the organization that I'm representing. And we want to represent you, the people working in the game industry. So it doesn't matter if you are a programmer, game designer, graphic artist, QA, whatever. If you're working in the game industry, we want to help you make sure that you have the best possible working conditions. Another organization that has been started is NIMBY, the Danish Institute for Game Development. So NIMBY is an organization that is focusing on the culture part of game development. They want to brand game development or Danish games to the Danish public and talk to the politicians and make sure that we have better conditions for working with games in Denmark. We have another organization that is called Games Denmark, and I see Niels, the director from this organization, sitting here as well. So Games Denmark is an organization targeted towards the games companies, the CEOs, the people who want to create better business connections and do collaborations with publishers and all that kind of stuff. So you can kind of say that we have this triangle between NIMBY, that is representing games as a cultural phenomenon, Games Denmark, that are representing games as a business, and we, Game Workers Guild, who are representing all the people working in the game industry. The way we make sure that we have the best possible working condition in Game Workers Guild is by working together with 4 different unions, Prosa, DM, HK, and FAF. And we have representatives from 3 of them here. Unfortunately, FAF couldn't make it today. I also promised to mention that each of these 4 unions also have what is called an A-kasse. So to mention very briefly, if you don't know what an A-kasse is, it's basically if you are a member and you become unemployed, you can be paid a bit of money, so you don't have to sell your apartment and actually have money for food and all that kind of stuff. That's the very brief explanation. So that's the landscape as it looks right now. So now I want to move on to the panel, and I want to present the different people here in the panel. So the first one that we have is Mirza from Prosa. So can you say a little bit about yourself, and maybe also mention what your favorite game is?
Of course. My name is Mirza. I am the union representative at Prosa, which is an IT union for IT professionals. I've been there for 3 years now. Before that, I used to work in the travel industry, but I've been a gamer ever since I had a Commodore and an Atari. I have currently in my Steam games library 700 games. I have about 100 on Epic, and let's not include GOG and all of the other stuff. My favorite game is depending on genre, but the one game that made me cry like a small kid. Seeing Danby for the first time was Mass Effect, especially when the Solarian scientist died. That really touched me in the feels. Sorry, spoiler warning for those who haven't played it. Awesome games, you should play it. But I was actually one of the main people pushing for Prosa to get engaged in game development, because I'm a gamer myself, and I know that a lot of people that intersect with IT also do games development, and that's why we're here today.
Thank you, Birsa. The next one in line is Anders from DM.
Yeah, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, my name is Anders. I'm 46 years old, which will also have some consequences what my favorite game is still. But I represent the Danish union DM, which has about 100,000 members, and we are the union for academics, people with a university degree in Denmark. And I come today as the head of the about 5,000 members of DM who work within culture and media. In DM we organize people with university educations from all sorts of types of journalism to all sorts of types of cultural institutions and organizations. And we are really engaged, extremely engaged in also the collective effort in getting more people from the gaming industry to join the union. Because as we see it, basically, you can get pretty far with individual work efforts and with your own ideas. But in order for those to flourish, you have to have support, you have to be part of a community, and that's what we offer as unions, a community to provide professional inspiration from colleagues and to provide better working conditions and to make good working lives even better. So that's also what we are standing for together here today. My favorite game, I thought a lot about it, but it's basically a game which I played when I was 10 years old from LucasArts, and it's called Doom. And it was heavily criticized at the time, as I remember it, but it was really great. It stayed with me. I played it with some of my friends. We had a lot of floppy disks we had to use to install the game. But the thing was that it was pretty good in using colors and sounds and visual effects to provide a great gameplay and creativity. And I actually use some inspiration from that today in my own work, everyday work, where I work as an exhibition and educational developer at a museum near Copenhagen. So that's me and DM.
Thank you, Anders. And the next one is Magnus from HK.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me? My name is Magnus, and I'm a union representative from HK here in Copenhagen. In HK we have around 150, a bit over 150,000 members in the whole Denmark, and I'm situated in Landsforening. I don't know what's that called in English, but graphic communication, where we have around 9,500 people. So I'm really concentrated towards the visual community within the larger HK. I've been a visual designer, a graphic designer, motion designer for more than 25 years prior to coming to HK. Way back, even before I started studying, even before I started working, I made a computer game for the Amiga with some other guys called Genetic Species, which was a first-person shooter. I made all the visuals, all the texture stuff. So and since then I haven't really touched computer games. So should I choose a favorite game, I'd have to go back to the early 90s. Unfortunately, and I think I'll either choose Dune 2 or maybe Genetic Species 1 for the PS.
Nice.
Thank you.
Nice. Thank you. So this is where the panel starts, and the way I wanted to go about this panel is so you can see all the lovely people over here. First of all, this is also a Q&A session, so if you have any questions to what is going on, please raise your hand and ask your question. This is a very interactive thing. But to get the panel started, I wanted to kick things off with a meme picture, because I think it was actually you, Mirza, who very recently shared this image, and I think it pretty accurately describes some of the concerns that you can have as a game developer in these days, that either you work on something that becomes very successful and then for some reason you are laid off, or you work on something that is not successful at all and then you are without a job. But no matter what happens, you end up without a job. And if you have been following along, we have heard these stories about a lot of big companies, at least internationally, have been laying off a lot of people. So you, as a game developer, you could be a little bit concerned. But I'm curious about, for the three of you, what are your thoughts about these mass layoffs that we have seen? Do you think that we could see something similar here in Denmark or in the Danish game industry?
Yes, go ahead.
One of the challenges with the gaming industry is that it's had a tendency towards being kind of a boom and bust industry, with a lot of booms and some busts. And of course, I think it's in the interest of the industry as a whole to get a more stable development, a stable growth. When it comes to these mass layoffs, I think one of the important things we have to face there is that it's important that people who are laid off still get opportunities to have to develop their skills, their profession, that they have offers of developing what they can do through further education while they're unemployed. Because the worst thing that can happen is that we get a job market in the gaming industry where people are laid off, and then the developers, the industry is only waiting for developers which are coming fresh from the educational pool from the universities and other institutions, and doesn't have this mix of different types of employees. They just hire new ones at a time.
I agree with Anders. I just wanted to expand a bit on that point. So I don't think that what we're seeing abroad internationally with all these mass layoffs at major gaming companies like Blizzard and Bethesda, with Rivals and Concord, that it will hit Denmark. And the reason I don't think that is because Denmark is not currently at the same level of development, or rather the same stage as games development in the United States, primarily. Denmark is, I spoke with somebody about this earlier, we're in a very fascinating stage right now because everybody present here and within the games industry in Denmark is witnessing the birth of a new industry. So games development in Denmark, as most of you know, has belonged under the producer union, which is traditionally where movies and TVs were usually organized, and that's because games were movies and TVs for the people who didn't know anything about it. And then, as you pointed out, we just got Games Denmark with Nils and the NIMBY Lab. So games development is getting its own identity, and we don't have that many AAA studios. And I think that the amazing thing about that is that we have a unique opportunity right now to make sure that games development in Denmark does not expand in the same way that the American market has done, where basically it's crunch time, your game is massively successful, you're fired, your game is a dud, you're fired. It's like Russian roulette, whether or not you actually have a job. I think I would rather we move towards a model where any success that is created in Denmark can be equally shared between the employees and the employer, without that being shutting down the department and then exporting it to China or somewhere else. Thanks.
Do you want to add something, Magnus, or no?
Just a thought, more generalistic character. I think what we see in the world right now is regarding to war, regarding to the new presidency in the US and whatnot. We have a lot of uncertainty in the world right now. And one of the places that we as unions could make amends really is actually for working for better working conditions in industries like the gaming. We see in other creative fields like unhealthy working conditions, unhealthy cultures really. So I think it's more to do with unhealthy culture that we need to get a grab on, and we can do that from a standpoint from us, from the unions, we need to go out broader. Like it's a political job also to get a grab of these, because it's systemic, and it's been in the gaming industry like forever. It's been in the movie industry, been in the creative fields. These sorts of like unhealthy and sometimes even toxic environment. We need to get like a broader debate on within our industry, how do we fix these things? I think that's the central thing.
But how can a union help with that?
We all have an answer to that, because of course there are several tools, and I know that Mirza and Magnus can also expand on that. But there are two things that unions can do. First of all, we can create a community by and of the people working in the gaming industry. We see that with the Game Workers Guild already. These communities can create a common understanding of what the employees are to accept and not to accept. So that's an important first step. But something else that unions also can do is to negotiate contracts or collective agreements with employers, where the employees, and that is also the unions, that is us, that is you, negotiate with the leaders from the industry and reach agreements on how the playing rules, the rules are for those who goes to work. What are the rules for maximum overtime? What are the rules for what you're getting paid each week? What are the rules for people who get sick and so on? And what we have to remember, and I've also emphasized that for several of you who are here today, the Danish and also the Swedish job markets, they are really tough if you don't have unions and if you don't have union collective agreements or contracts, because we have very little legislation in Denmark, unlike other countries that provide rules for what the employers are to do. So you have to have some organization in Denmark and Sweden to get the benefits, which are also in this job market. And in the long run, it creates better workplaces. So it's also in the interest of the employers. They might have to do some negotiation with us, all of us here today, to start with. They also have to limit the number of overtime and the number of times they can set in with crunch. But in the long run, they get healthier workplaces and better production and a better work environment.
Because you talked about that working in a games company. I don't know. When I look into the audience, it looks like a lot of people are working in the game industry. So by raise of hands, how many have a job in the industry? Okay, so that's a fairly good portion. So how many of you are interested in like getting in? Like you might be working as a student and you want to get a job in the game industry. Okay, so we have.
Not anymore.
Cool. Because very often when you start out as a student, you get a job as an intern. So I'm curious about, like, can you talk a little bit about what would be the rights that you have as an intern? Because I would imagine that you're not like an employee yet. You're something in between. Can you talk a little bit about what would be the rights as a person who are working as an intern?
So what are you asking again? You know, like the contract you're signing as an intern or what?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think we should go a long way to like make sure that whether you're a student or an intern or whatever, you should basically have the same right as, you know, people who are hired on a normal contract, really. Of course, the wages are lower. Of course, you know, the responsibility is a whole other place because you're new to the field. But other than that, you know, if you're supposed to be skilled, if you're supposed to be a person who can really work together with other professionals in a few years to come, I think you should really, you know, get the same. That's my, you know, I've trained a lot of people in students and whatnot, you know, from design schools the last 20 years or so. And I've always, you know, looked at it like, you know, you have to onboard people, you know, as quickly as possible. They can't be students too long. They can't be like, you know, juniors and whatnot. But again, in the creative industry, there are this like built really structured hierarchy that keeps on, I think, pushing people down a lot, not really seeing people for what they're really capable of. And I think that sticks true to this day. And I think that's sad because, in order to be better, in order to be within the game industry, fostering the next talents, we need to have a more healthy, simply community within the gaming industry, within the companies.
So my personal opinion on this is that there's obviously a very big difference between being an intern at a company like, let's just say, Lego, or being an intern at a company at a startup, right? At a startup, everybody sacrifices a part of themselves, and so obviously even the founders might not work for a lot of money and everything. That's a different situation. You're willingly sacrificing something. So I don't even think maybe you can talk about being an intern for a startup in a way, because everybody's in the same boat. But I am vehemently against unpaid internship at bigger companies. I think that's an abuse of employers, because there's no such thing as unqualified labor. If you're paying your cleaning staff, you should be paying an intern that's doing the job of a junior staff as well. And not doing that is, in my opinion, often a black mark on some extremely good companies in Denmark. And notice I said in Denmark because obviously I can't speak on behalf of international companies, but in Denmark that should be abolished. I find it offensive that anybody's being asked to work for free. And that's because a lot of companies, at least from what I've experienced, is they use it as we can save some money here, we don't have to train them up, so they can work for free, and then we can offer them a job afterwards. And that's just, I don't know, it doesn't sit well with me. I would like to see a political movement or a political decision from the government to ban that type of work. And I'm not saying that they should be fully salaried, I'm just saying that they should be compensated fairly. Whether that be an hourly wage or something along those lines, yeah.
Yeah, and I agree, really. But something that we could do within the industry, also with the collective agreement, was to regulate the way that the interns are being used, junior developers, how they're paid, how they're coming into the different companies. We can make collective agreements about that, and that way avoid the direct misuse of labor, which I think it is if you get people to work free for longer periods in order to offer them a job, or even without offering them a job.
I saw there was a couple of questions. I didn't saw who was first, but I think we will go with you first.
Yes, I think it's a specific question to Magnus first. You said that you should, when it comes to the rights of the internship, that you should try, compared to the ones that we higher up, should be more or less the same. But then the thing is, when you start out, it's kind of hard to tell what rights you have. And as you also mentioned, big companies can maybe abuse the internship. So I was wondering, how can you know if you have all the rights they deserve, and whether or not the junior, for example, code provides help with that, with contracts, going through it. I myself as well, HOCO member, so I was wondering as well, personally, do you get help with that? Or maybe even other unions, DM, Prosa, we could also offer that service.
Well, yeah, we do help with contracts and stuff like that. That's one of our main goals, really, our main assignments. So yeah, of course. So whatever field you're in, whatever contract you're signing up to or have questions to, we are going through that. We're helping you with that, securing that you get the best conditions as possible.
And it looked like you had an answer for that, Anders, or?
No, just to add on what you're saying, Magnus, because I think all of the unions help the student or the interns who are members and who are at the workplaces within the industry. But we can also get some victories. A couple of years ago, we in DM succeeded in getting DR, the big public broadcaster, to provide the salaries for all interns that are at the workplace. So there are no more interns in DR who are not getting paid for their work. And that was software development, which has some similarities with the gaming industry, where you saw interns without any pay setting up radio programs, having editorial roles, calling in guests, and even hosting some radio shows. And that was, of course, a major problem for the organization and for the people working there, that the DR, even a public company, weren't paying people for that. But we won a victory. They ended up paying a salary. We got a collective agreement on that field. And I think in time we can also get that together in the gaming industry.
There was a hand up. Do you still have a hand? Okay, then Niels had something.
Yeah, I was just wondering, do you have some concrete examples? Now you mentioned DR, but can you maybe mention an example from the industry where interns are not getting paid? Because I feel that the systemic problem of the interns not getting paid is usually because they're part of a school thing where we cannot pay them because they get SU, right? So if the companies, if I wanted for my own company to pay them, that would actually be detrimental to their sort of success of getting SU. I've never really heard of a company besides what Mirza mentions, the interns of a startup. Is there a big gaming company you can mention that actually have free interns?
I can say that you can pay students who are getting SU.
Sorry, what?
There's no problem in paying students who are interns who are getting SU.
They usually just don't want it because that will hit. They usually have a cafe job or something else that they are running. They usually don't want pay.
But that's another deal if they earn too much. But the limits of how much you can earn before the amount is detracted in your SU, your student support, is rather high.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't, from my perspective, see that as a challenge. But of course, if they have 3 cafe jobs and earning a bundle
I
with
think the
some
question was if you could mention an example, not so much. You also mentioned there's no regulation at all, but we have functional law, right? There is some regulation in Denmark.
That's true, but you, for example, do not have a minimum wage in Denmark, which is there's legislation about that.
But that's for everyone, right? We don't have minimum wage in Denmark.
We have a minimum wage through collective agreements,
Yeah.
so that's what we normally call the collective agreement. And we have less legislation in Denmark than most other countries. Denmark has a smaller portion of labor legislation than does Bolivia, for example. So this shows that the way the Danish labor market has developed, and the reason why the Danish labor market can be a really great place to work, is also because most industries are covered by collective agreements.
Is Bolivia as productive as Denmark? No, you just mentioned that Bolivia has more rules than Denmark, but is Bolivia as productive as Denmark?
No, of course it's not. So that's my point exactly.
So
It's through the collective agreements. It's through the bargaining power of both the unions and the employers that the Danish labor market has become so efficient. That's also what we've seen. Normally we say that people in Denmark work less than people in Southern Europe because of the working hours. But the thing is, because the Danish collective agreements with the unions have managed to follow that each time the Danish productivity, each time people in Denmark become more productive, we've been able to lower the amount of time that people work. We've been able to create better conditions, better work-life conditions through bargaining and through better productivity, through the fact that we have an organized labor market. And this is also why I see great perspectives in the gaming industry being covered by collective agreements, because it will create a better labor market for everybody, both the employers and the employees. So the case about Bolivia, the reason why it's a bad example, Bolivia, and it's a good example of this, is that we do not need all this legislation as long as we have the bargaining powers, and we have the unions, and we have the collective agreements. If we lack that, we need a lot.
You're mentioning minimum salary, and I think you need to distinguish between what is an entrepreneurial problem and what is a sort of company or industry problem, right? If you create a minimum wage for the industry, how will you sort of balance the fact that entrepreneurs are not, as Mirza mentioned, even able to pay their own salary? How will you create a company around that? Because we also don't, like the film industry, we don't get 1 billion, we get 15 million a year, so it's a little bit more complicated.
I really love this debate, and we can carry on forever, because
Yes, exactly.
I have great arguments to counter exactly that, because you can work with different types because we are quite flexible in handling different types of companies. So you don't need to worry, but I do think we need to worry about all the other people who are not getting...
There was a hand right behind. Do you want to go first?
I had 2 examples if it was of game studios. IOI offers 3 months unpaid. GoShip Games offers 6 months.
Okay. That's good to know.
And not paid internships. They don't offer.
Very good to know.
Thank you for saying that. I didn't want to mention names, so to make enemies.
Well, that's the example.
Just to repeat what you said, so you mentioned IO and GoShip.
Can I say? I don't know any examples who pay their interns. Do you know any examples of game companies who pay their interns? Would love to.
I don't know. I just, all the examples I've had myself where the interns were, it's usually because they've been part of a study. I never personally had interns after they completed a study. Then I would just hire them.
Yeah, you can earn up until 10,000 a month before you don't get a suit, but nobody offers it. So we were like, yeah, let's get paid, and they're like, no, we have a suit.
I think you up there had a hand.
Do you have questions about the same thing?
Yeah, I just have a comment on that.
Yes.
Okay, so I know that when the full topic was run, they had like a 3,000 thing that they paid their interns. It was some, I don't know, it's something with being an intern through school system thing, university thing, that you can pay up until 3,000 or something. But I also think you could pay the interns, even if they are students, they just have to get more than the SU or what they already earn, so they can like not get SU anymore, so you can like
basically cover the SU cost as well.
A livable wage.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Same for him, if he has something about the same topic.
I think you first. Yes.
I'm from Sonic College, and we educate sound designers for the game industry. Our students are not allowed to get a salary during their internship because the internship is part of the education. It's not just an add-on. It's a part of the actual curriculum. So they can't get paid, just to say that. And they are, because of that, they are not covered by the agreements that you're doing. So when they work at DR, they can get aid and help when they are ill and stuff like that because they are not getting paid. But that's part of the education system, and that's another issue that they can do that. But just to say, there is a hole in that system. So some students can't get paid.
That's an excellent point. Thank you for making it. I would have touched on it myself, but I want to say that, as you said, that's a different discussion for a different period because there are educations that run apprenticeships instead of internships, and those are fully paid throughout the education. So perhaps we should look into games development moving towards that model, where people become apprentices at different companies. But we can talk about that for hours. Let's move on.
Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I think it's important to keep a keen eye on the difference between internships and apprenticeships also, and to, as you say, develop it in that direction. But what I think is the norm among many of the big educational institutions, for example, the University of Copenhagen, the big universities, that you can get paid while on internship. But it's important to, of course, to remember and notice this whole or this exception that you mentioned.
Yes, maybe I should start saying that I'm employed at SYBO and I'm also part of DM. I have a question with regards to something maybe a bit more nerdy, but I'm really curious to hear your guys' thoughts on this. So I know here in Denmark we have something called Arbejdsmiljørepræsentant or Health and Safety Committee. At least that's what it's called in my company.
Yep.
And I'm very curious to hear like how can someone who has that position, and I might become that at my company, and I really want to help like create a better work environment in the games industry because I can also see a lot of these issues, and I'm kind of curious to hear like what can someone who is like part of this Arbejdsmiljørepræsentantskab, how can people who have that power, how can we help make a better work environment? Like just very broadly speaking, you can take whatever you want from it. Like I just want to hear your thoughts on it.
Well, first of all, great that you're working with that. And as a work environment representative, you can do quite a lot, because that is one of the few things that employers in Denmark are obliged to do through legislation, is to provide an organization that looks after the work environment. And one thing that you do is, of course, the physical challenges of the job you could look at, but something which is which is a development within the field of work environment is also to look at the psychological work environment, the inclusivity of the workplace. How are the different employees treating each other? How's the relationship with management? Do some people fear to go to certain meetings and so on? And you have an opening also to discuss that with the management as a representative of your colleague working with the work environment. And something which is quite important there is that you have to have a survey among the employees every, I think it's second year, yeah.
It's the FHA, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Where you sort of test the work environment, and there it's important to try to hear your colleagues what are the main themes that they're focusing on, because that can affect which questions you ask them.
If I can just add to that, I was actually an AMR at my former workplace as well. So with AMRs, it's enshrined into law. You have to have it. But you have to be, and you should talk to DM about this to make sure that an AMR can be either an amazing thing or it can just be a show, depending on how it's set up. The idea behind the AMR is that you are representative of the employees, and then the others are representative of the employers. And there needs to be that balance. But if it's you and then 4 other people and they're all on the part of the employer, then that is not an effective way of governing the AMR organization within the company. There are a bunch of rules. There's also the fact that you need to be sent to a 3-day course to learn about all of these rules and regulations. They need to do that and pay for it. So I always said that one of the reasons I was a good AMR is because I didn't give a fuck. Basically about what would happen to me. So I would always make noise about things I was unhappy with, and people saw that, and that made me a good AMR because then people trusted me to come and fight for them. But there is always the risk of making too much noise, and you have to be willing to live with that, because if you do make too much noise, then the employer can fire you. There are no guarantees just because you're an AMR. There is a bit of more compensation, but you are as disposable as anybody else within the company. The optics of that, however, if they can live with that, that would be on their shoulders. But I think check in with Anders and make sure that everything is as it should be according to law. Because sometimes people tell me they're AMRs, and I ask a little bit about it, and I'm like, it sounds like you're a secretary in like the employer's monthly meeting or whatever, because they're not actually doing anything.
But you are supposed to be protected against firing as AMRs. And actually, as an AMR, it's a great idea to be a member of a union, for example, DM, but also one of the others, because the union can support you if the management becomes hostile to some ideas. Most AMRs have great cooperation with their bosses, their employers, so most of the time it goes great. But you can get a lot of support from your union, both in working as an AMR, but also if you get nervous for getting fired, then the union can support you.
I think you had a question up there?
It's a bit of a slightly off-related question, and it's also for you, Kristian, because it might fit a bit better in your case. But it's regarding crappy experiences in the Danish gaming industry. You said yourself you've seen some horror shows or shit shows, or what you want to call it. Mm-hmm. You hear a lot of horror stories about working in the game industry globally, both in Europe with, for example, CD Projekt Red, and the US with multiple studios like Blizzard and Riot, etc. And as somebody who hasn't stepped officially into the industry yet, I was kind of curious what your experiences were, maybe you can answer more from a client perspective, in regards to how the Danish game industry has been, and then for how it is right now, and then for the union specifically, what efforts are you guys making to kind of steer companies more in the right direction instead of going into the direction of the AAA companies? Of course, we're still small here, but we're going to get there sometime, hopefully, and it would be nice to kind of know what the efforts are being done to prevent situations like that from happening.
Can I take this? I think that the benefit of being in Denmark is that there is a general adherence to social norms. I've spoken with Niels about this several times, that the biggest Danish companies are actually amazing places to work. Notwithstanding unpaid internship, SYBO and Ghost Games and others offer good salaries, good other amenities, parental leave, all of this stuff. But that's because they have a success. They have something that can pay the bills, and so obviously they want to make people happy by staying there. And then there's the cultural aspect of it. I think where we probably should be aiming mostly is what we call SMVs, small og mellemstore virksomheder, which means small to middle size businesses, and then under there. And I think what we're trying to do is, we as unions are both cooperating with each other, which is sometimes unusual, to be honest, because we are oftentimes more busy stealing members from each other than we are cooperating. So that's just, I love the fact that we got this going, because I think it's a very important signal to send. And then the other thing is that we're also constantly open to cooperating with Games Denmark and NIMBY and others, because I don't think us as unions coming in and saying like, this is what we want, give it to us, right? That's like union thinking in the 1900s. And these days I think it should be more cooperation with everybody involved. So the employees on the behalf of the unions. So we're trying to prevent what's happening abroad, happening in Denmark, by cooperating as much as possible, trying to get a consensus on how this should be done, and then ensuring that if anybody's not willing to play ball, then they're called out. In Denmark we have several ways of like pointing to a workplace and saying this is a good workplace, and then this is a bad workplace, depending on how it's done. So I think mostly it comes down to cooperation, and it also really, I think this is the key point, is it actually comes to you guys. Like if you want an industry that's specifically geared towards the way you want to work, and a livable wage, and all of this other stuff, then that requires you to join unions and be vocal about it. Because if you're just thinking unions are not for me, and I don't care what happens and stuff like that, and then in 10 years time you're like, I'm not earning any money, I have to switch jobs to a bank to pay my mortgage and pay for my kids and stuff like that, that's because you weren't vocal enough about what matters to you. So the more people are organized, the more people actually join Game Workers Guild and Discord and say like, I think this is important, I think this is important, and we should fight for this. That way you make sure that it changes. Because different from the United States is that we have unions that cover trades. We don't have unions that cover companies. And so we can have a much bigger effect if people are willing to actually organize that way.
I see there's a bunch of questions, so I think let's talk afterwards. You had a question.
Yes, thank you. Since I'm not Danish, I was wondering what is, if there is one, the involvement of the Danish government in this effort, and also do you feel that as the industry grows bigger, should we move this collective effort from a national standpoint to a more of an international standpoint, so European Union and stuff like that? What's your opinion on this?
Good question. Should I answer it? Interesting question. In Denmark, the way that it's split up is that we call it the Danish labor model. And the Danish labor model consists of three parties: the employers, the employees, and the government. Right? They're the ones who decide on many aspects of the Danish labor market. And in this case, the employees are represented by unions, the employers are represented by, for example, Games Denmark represents the employers in this case, right, the companies. And then the government comes in and mitigates whenever there's need for it. So there's a tendency that the government will usually let the two parties agree, and if they can't agree, then they come in and act as the adults. So that's mostly the role of the government. And now, obviously, it's also the role of the government to sort of grant special status. Basically what's happened now with NIMBY, right, is that for a long time we were talking, Nils had an amazing talk about culture, like our games culture. And then finally the government goes like, yeah, of course games are culture. Here's a games institute for you guys to develop more games and show what, So the government has a lot of, I would say, like a lot of power when needed, and then mostly it's about optics. Like, what do we think about games being developed in Denmark? With regards to going international, I think it's an interesting question, but it's also a very difficult topic because union models in different countries work differently, right? In Denmark, we have a very proud tradition of organizing, and the reason why we have the Danish model that we have today with 5 weeks of vacation, 6 weeks of vacation, paid parental leave, all of this stuff, like sick leaves, your kids' sick days and stuff, that's because that's what the unions negotiated. And then when unions negotiate something, what usually happens is it spreads out the rest of the society, regardless whether it's the public sector or the private sector. But it's very difficult to implement that same model in countries that don't have the tradition of unionizing. So I think mostly my personal aspiration would be for Denmark to be like a beacon where people can then point and show like, oh, look at the games industry in Denmark. What a success story that is, and then maybe we can apply it. And we're seeing like brief glimpses of that. For example, we're seeing a lot of unionization going on in the United States, but as I said before, it's mostly company-wide. Like you hear about the QA testers that Bethesda have organized, or you're hearing about this other department in a game has unionized. But it's like unionization on a very small scale, and in the whole grand scheme of things, it's not a lot of power because it's just one, But imagine if you came like 150 or 130,000 members, and you're like, this is what's important to us. That's what we want through, and then that's a totally different ballgame, right? Because then you're talking about the national level. You're not talking about it. So I don't think that we can export. I would love to, but I don't think we can export the Danish model elsewhere. But I think that we could, if we do an amazing job, I think that we could definitely be a model that people could point towards of doing things differently than how they're being done elsewhere. And at least that's fine.
With other unions in other European states or even in the world itself.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is that we actually get unions come up here all the time, visit us. We have like brother and sister unions across Europe and stuff like that. But it's funny because they come and you can clearly see the cultural differences of, they go like, you can do what? And they're like, hey, yeah, we can do that. And they're like, you can't do that? And like, no, man, we're basically like a members club only kind of stuff, Yeah. So it's difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to elaborate on that, because this is another issue we could talk about for hours. I promise I won't. But the thing is that what we see is that especially in tech companies, also in the gaming industry, a number of companies have departments in different countries. So many of you are going to end up having colleagues who work in Greece, in Italy, in Britain, and so on. So something which we think is important, and I think it's the same for Mirza and Magnus, is to keep a keen eye on who are the other unions who are organizing the workers in the other part of the company, which is in the other country, and keep a close contact. That's quite important also because then you can coordinate and ask about what are the working conditions in the different countries. How can we make demands which are not unreasonable, but which are reasonable? I think one of the keys to that is also to, even though we in Scandinavia, the Danish and the Swedish and the Norwegian labor markets and our organization look a lot like each other, even though we think that we're the best in the world for that. So also to look at the union efforts in other countries with some respect and also with some patience and distance.
Yes, there's 2 questions left. I think you had one.
Yes, this question is a bit similar to the previous questions, but talking about the layoffs happening now, do you think it's maybe caused by AI becoming so popular and like introducing so many programs? And if that's the case, do you think it could affect the Danish industries as well? And is the Danish government doing anything in order to like prevent this happening and protect workers from unemployment because of this? Like maybe laws about it and such?
Well, I think regarding AI, I think you talk about generative AI that we have had now for 2.5 years maybe, in a broader sense. We still need to see the impact it actually has on the working, on companies, on the workforce, etc. I think there's a lot of hype right now. There has been a lot of hype for the last 1.5 to 2 years, and the hype continues, in regard to what generative AI can do and what it can't do. One thing though is I think a lot of companies using AI have made a decision right now to maybe evaluate upon what a generative AI mean for the productiveness inside the companies. So I think a healthy way to look at it right now is really to analyze and see what could we do with the people we have already in our companies before we go out and make any new decisions regarding layoffs and whatnot.
Then we have time for one last question. Is it a quick one?
In the hopefully unlikely case that our market becomes as demonic as the US is, how willing are the members to actually do something like strike or maybe even violence?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I won't fight with Nils, regardless of the issues. But very good question, and it actually segues perfectly into a point we have. So in Denmark, we have two types of unions. We have what are called red unions and yellow unions. The yellow unions are very cheap, red ones are not. And the reason that red ones, all of these ones here, are not is because we actually have mandatory savings for conflict budgets. And that's because, yes, we are willing to do it. We haven't done it in a while, so I wonder if the muscles are still there, but we've done it before. And we do it also in other types. You might have heard of last year with Tesla. There were certain unions in Denmark that did sympathy strikes with the unions in Sweden. And that's because we aren't afraid to use it, but we also don't use it willy-nilly. So if need be, that's what we can do. We can organize and we can send out, especially if we stand shoulder to shoulder, and we can send a pretty strong signal. So all of the unions present here save up money for those days where that's necessary, and also make sure that there is money in what's called the Løngarantifonden, which is basically like if anybody goes bankrupt, that you still get paid out. And that's why unions like ours cost a little bit more than the other unions. And it is also one thing. We have a very proud tradition of striking in Denmark, but selectively and when it makes impact, not for just anything.
Yeah, and the part of that story is also that because the unions in Denmark and Scandinavia traditionally are very strong, we have fewer strikes than they do in other countries with weaker unions. So what we see, as Mirza is also saying, is that we can strike, but we would rather not, and the people in the workplaces would rather not. And in the end, it comes down to getting negotiations going and getting agreements with the employers that everybody can live with. So I think in the end, even though we can strike, it comes down to membership. As Mirza and Magnus also said before, something that the employers at Games Denmark will ask, and it's totally fair and reasonable that they ask about it when we meet them, is how many members do you have? Do you represent the people that are employed in our companies? And in the end, that's your choice, all of you here. If you want to be represented, if you want to have collective agreements, if you want to have better work conditions, you have to become members of a union, a real union, one of us, in order to show the employers that we can stand together and make agreements.
We are running out of time, but thank you so much for all of the questions. I have one last slide that is just to say thank you to all of you. I put up a QR code for our Discord server, so if you think that the conversation today has been quite interesting and you want to keep the conversation going, or you have more questions for these people, then please join our Discord server. We will also create a membership for at some point where being part of this membership will make it easier for us to get a better movement on all of these things. But thank you everyone for showing up, and thank you so much for all of the questions.
Sorry, we are here the rest of the day. You can come if you want to talk person to person about different aspects. You're more than welcome to come and talk to us. I'll be here the rest of the week as well, and I'll represent everybody as best as I can. So, thank you.